We are going to have Charlie Giroux tomorrow. He's in a meeting today. He's down at CPAC, and they get that all really underway today. And then tomorrow it really kicks into full gear. 806 on the Main Street of America. But I am fascinated by great teachers. I am fascinated by philosophies. I'm fascinated by people who are thinking through life. And so I'm fascinated by this next guest, Jeffrey Katz, who's a lifelong student and teacher of rationalist religious philosophy. And he has written a book called The Secret Life, a book of wisdom from the great teacher. Jeffrey Katz joins us here this morning. Jeffrey, of course, has appeared on national television, a broad range of issues. He's a lawyer. He's an author. I don't know if he ever sleeps, but Jeffrey, good morning. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Great, Gary. It's great to be here with you.
Well, it's an honor to have you aboard. Thank you so much. The Secret Life, a book of wisdom from the great teacher. And you point out a guy in here that a lot of people, I would dare say, probably have never heard about.
Right. It's Maimonides, and he really was, Gary, one of the greatest minds of the past 1,000 years. He was a religious thinker, rabbi, philosopher, but he was also a scientist, astronomer. He was one of the greatest physicians, doctors of his time. He was the doctor to the Sultan Saladin in Egypt, and he was an amazing thinker. And he's actually the only personality after Bible times, Gary, who's actually celebrated by all three major Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and even Islam. So, when those three can get together and agree on something, you have something pretty spectacular.
How did you get interested in Maimonides? How did you get interested in him?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of just stumbled into it, Gary, when I was a teenager many, many years ago. It's funny. I once went home for Passover, and my father had just dropped a book on Maimonides off on the coffee table in our house, never said a word to me about it. And I started reading some of his ideas, and I was thinking to myself, it's actually complicated to read some of this stuff, but when you delve into it and you understand it, the basic ideas are so simple and so transformational. And I wound up devoting a large part of my life to understanding his teachings. And again, it just bothered me that people didn't understand or have access to the very basic and simple to understand principles, but really which are the key to lifting us out of our daily doldrums and making our lives much more meaningful. And that's why I wrote the book, too, so that everybody could have access to these ideas.
Jeffrey, tell me some of the basic teachings in there for people to kind of, hear a little bit about this guy.
Yeah, many of the teachings are so basic and even woven into our society. For example, Maimonides discusses charity at length. Now, charity is about giving, of course, but he talks about if charity is done the right way, the benefits that accrue to the giver also from the charity are really amazing. So Maimonides has a ladder of charity with 8 degrees. The greatest degree of charity is, of course, to teach a man to fish instead of giving him a fish. So that age-old wisdom is attributed to
promoted independence, too, on that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's so applicable to today also because now in politics we have the rise of the socialist utopians, if you will, within the Democratic Party who seem to be so focused on the safety net and making sure that people have cradle-to-grave entitlements, when really what we could really be doing for them would be to be making them self-sufficient, which according to Maimonides is a much higher form of charity, getting people on their own feet. And you wonder why is there not a bipartisan jobs retraining program now in the country, since our economy now is spinning off hundreds of thousands of new jobs a month. So that's an example of the types of things that Maimonides talks about.
It's a shame he's not still around and in counseling Congress. I said to a couple of congressmen friends of mine one day, I said, in Congress, before you pass a bill, it ought to say, how do I keep people or give people, allow people to practice their freedom and liberty through this particular bill? And if that bill somehow hurts people or takes away their independence and starts to make them more dependent, then it ought not be passed. And then he said, well, they'd laugh at that. I said, that's a problem. Too much common sense. Sounds like Maimonides was right there.
Absolutely, Gary. That's a great point. through these principles, one also develops a relationship with God that's ever closer and really becomes almost a partner with God in the process of doing these things. And the benefits that accrue to somebody, for example, on charity, Maimonides then says after the highest level of charity, which is, helping someone become able to support himself, you then have different levels depending on the degrees of anonymity of the donor and the recipient. And the more anonymous, the better. And now, from the recipient's point of view, anonymity is nice because it may save him embarrassment and so forth. But from the donor's perspective, it's equally important because as the donor is developing these character traits of his, which are developing a healthy emotional detachment from money, which will help the donor make money in the future because, when you get used to spending money, you got to spend money to make money. It makes people more amenable to taking risks that they need to take in business. It also tremendously develops one's sense of empathy because, when one is involved in charity, one needs to understand the needs of the needy person. And it also makes him feel much more fortunate and blessed and grateful because he realizes the donor himself does not have those same needs. So it winds up being a cycle of positivity and feeling blessed and close to God that winds up having tremendous benefits, not only for the needy person who needs the help, but equally for the donor. It's really remarkable.
When you think about Maimonides, here's a guy that served Saladin, who was fighting, I believe, against King Richard the Lionhearted during the Crusades, if I'm not mistaken on that. He was a Muslim, and yet here you are of the Jewish faith, and we're whooping in their Christianity, which isn't that far off, obviously. So it's kind of a collision there, isn't it, of different kinds of philosophies right there?
Well, it's funny. It's a collision, but in Maimonides, the three actually came together.
Okay.
Because Maimonides actually bequeathed to Thomas Aquinas, the great saint of Catholicism and Christianity. A lot of Maimonides' basic principle in life was accept the truth from whatever source it comes. Very different from today's political environment, obviously, when it depends on the source. If you don't like the source, you try to destroy the source. Maimonides was the opposite of that. Maimonides' techniques show us how to cultivate relationships and build things up and accept goodness and truth from whatever source they come. So he played a big role in harmonizing Jewish thought with the best that science and philosophy had to offer. And then St. Thomas Aquinas really took up that banner, but from the side of Christianity rather than Judaism. And Maimonides himself looked to the society that he lived in, which, as you know, was obviously an Islamic society.
Right.
So these three really it's really fascinating, actually, Gary, that the three really came together through Maimonides' work and what that might hold for a potential future.
Well, I hope
coming together.
I hope, Jeffrey, and I hope we can talk again sometime because our time here is short this morning. I apologize. But The Secret Life, a book of wisdom from the great teacher, came out January 22nd this year, brand new. Jeffrey Katz is the author. Jeffrey, where can they pick this up?
It's available everywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target. The Secret Life, a book of wisdom, and I implore people to read it with their, Maimonides was also a pioneer in the field of unconditional love, and it can raise people's relationships with their spouses to the next level. I really urge people to read it and use the principles of Maimonides.
Jeffrey, I hope we can keep going to the next level next time I talk with you. Great having you in this morning. Thank you so much. Again, big red book, big white printing, The Secret Life, Jeffrey Katz underneath it. Get out there and grab that book. Jeffrey, thanks so much. Until our next time, I say have a great day.
Thank you, Gary. God bless.
Thank you. Jeff Katz with us here on WSBA Morning News with Gary Sutton. We take a break. We come right back. It's your turn to make the call here on WSBA. It's 814.